Hi, viewers. Welcome to Carolina Forward Interviews, where we sit down with our elected officials to talk about the issues of today, the future of our state, and what motivates our public officials to do what they do. I'm Zach Berly. I'm joined today by Senator Michael Garrett, who represents District Number 27, which is the Guilford County, Greensboro, High Point area. First of all, Senator, thank you so much for joining us.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Now, I want to start off with the fact that, you're a person who is very tied into the area that you represent. You went to UNC Greensboro, so you really have a real roots in the area. What is it like to be able to represent the area that you call home, that your friends and your family, the people that are around you, you're able to say that you represent them, that you're their voice in the legislature?
I mean, it's a really unique community to represent because Guilford County is so diverse. I mean, we've got two pretty large cities contained within one county, and I also represent some small towns. Went to school in a small town, Summerfield Elementary School, growing up. So, you have a lot of relationships that you've made over my 38 years on this planet, and my relationships are diverse like Guilford County. Republicans, Democrats, Independents, people who hate all politicians and hate politics. So I think it really makes you a better representative of people when you come to work in government to advocate for them and for their families. Because, one of the ways I approach this job is, to me, there are not specific Republican ideas and specific Democratic ideas. There are good ideas and there are bad ideas. And so I think looking at government through that lens, because that's how I've always grown up, it's how I've been successful in business, is focusing on solutions that help people or get something done, is kind of unique. And I think representing Guilford County and my upbringing, that I've always lived there, is part of what kind of framed that lens for me when I came to Raleigh.
Now, as opposed to some other Democrats in the state, because of changing demographics, because of the maps, many of them represent urban areas. Because of the way that the maps have been drawn, many of them are stuffed into city limits. Now, you're one of the Democrats that has city limits. Would you also have small towns? What is that town and gown politics like, maybe for some representatives both in the state and out of the state? Because it's a trend that's all over the country, where sometimes you don't have to leave a city center to go and talk to your voters, but you're out in small towns on Main Street. What is that like?
I mean, I love it because I love having you have some of the same issues that are shared between people that live in cities and live in rural North Carolina, but you also have a different set of issues. So it keeps the job more entertaining. There's always something new to work on. It's more work if you're the elected representative, because you have to go out and meet people where they are. I think that's one of the great takeaways when I met with Senator Kay Hagan when I was first considering running for politics, and she said, one of the things you never lose touch of is meeting people where they are. And that's, I think, what is missing in politics a lot. People don't do the work of going out, meeting people where they are, whether it's the grocery store, whether it's a PTA meeting, whether it's their local drugstore, local bake shop, car dealership. I mean, that's the kind of work you do to meet people where they are, because you can find them when they're not expecting to see you, and they're going to give you genuine answers and responses to what really their needs are of their family. So I think if more of us got more proactive in reaching voters, we'd probably see more success, and we wouldn't see this, I think, artificial divide, rural-urban divide that we all talk about.
I think that's fair. Now, obviously, people don't just get into politics most of the time on a whim. There's issues and things that drive you. For yourself, what are those? What is the areas that made you want to get into public service?
If I'm going to be honest, it's because I got angry. I am the person that I am today, and I have what I have today because the people of this state believed in certain things, believed in a rising tide lifts all boats, believed in reinvesting in their neighbors and care for others. And I think since 2010, this state really lost those guiding principles. It became more about, let's give tax cuts to big companies and cut taxes on the wealthy folks, and we're going to pay for that by balancing it on the backs of our children, our public schools, our teachers, and healthcare in this state. And I think that really was a betrayal to the commitment that this state has made to its people. And so I want my children, I have 2 children, I have Jack, who's 5, and Charlotte, who's 2.5, and I want them to have the same opportunity that I had, and I don't want them to have to move to another state to do it. Because I think North Carolina still is the best state in the country because of the people that live in this state. We just have to get back to our values and live up to our promises.
Now, we'll shift to your role in Raleigh and what it's like on the Senate floor. What does it look like with a Republican supermajority where most of the time when the sides meet, it's inter-party? They don't have to come to you guys to really get anything passed because they've got the votes to do it. What is it like seeing that sort of negotiation bypass you that happened really between the center-right and the extreme right within the Republican Party?
So I got elected for the first time in 2018 when we broke the supermajority. So I have never served in the superminority, which I think is a terrible word because there's nothing super about it. So I haven't experienced that firsthand. I anticipate it, but I really think it's not as dire as everyone thinks because there are members of the Republican caucus who are still flirt with a moderate lane, and they will need Democratic votes on certain things they want to get done because the far right of their caucus is going to be a challenge for them. So there's going to be times where we can lean in and put pressure on the Republican caucus to force them to come to the table to negotiate with us on some things that they want to accomplish. I think, medical marijuana in this state is one thing they're going to need Democratic votes on. Sports betting is something that they really want. If they want that to get through the Senate, they're going to need some Democratic votes on that. So when issues like that come to the floor, we have an opportunity to lean in and bring them to the table. And I anticipate that we'll be doing so. I also think there are some components of their legislative agenda that they want to prioritize that are out of the mainstream with where North Carolina is, and some of their more vulnerable incumbents won't want to be taking difficult votes. So if one Republican doesn't show up, governor's veto can still be sustained. So I think we'll probably see that play out too. So I'm not all doom and gloom. I think there is still hope. We're down by just one seat, and hopefully we'll fix that in 2024.
You mentioned that you were elected in 2018. That was with one map. You ran in 2016. That was with one map. You've run again. That's with one map. I mean, you're on a few now. I bet you didn't anticipate being a cartographer by this time, but that's pretty much where you're at as much as we talk about them. Can you give us your perspective on that? I know that there's so much in North Carolina is about redistricting, but just being on literally the front lines of this map-making challenge that has sent you back and forth over who's your constituent and who's not, what has it been like being on the forefront of that battlefield?
Well, I mean, the nice part of always getting a new district is you're always making new friends. But, I think my district in Guilford County is a great example of what is so wrong with gerrymandering in this state, that people have no idea from one cycle to the next who's going to represent them in government. And who really gets hurt, it's not the politician who's running, it's the people who never get a chance to build a relationship with someone who is their fighter and advocate in Raleigh or in D.C. And it's also telling that we have had 4 different maps. That means there's been court intervention 4 times, which always means that the taxpayers look in the bill. Because unfortunately, the folks in the General Assembly, when they go to court, the people who are paying the bills for the General Assembly are the taxpayers in North Carolina. So it's unfortunate for a lot of things, the threat to democracy, because you actually don't have a government that's representative or reflective of the people of this state. You never get a chance to build relationships with your elected officials who represent you and your family in Raleigh, and then just the fiscal expense behind it.
Now, the attention is not just at the state level, because I know that's something that sometimes gets overlooked. We talk so much about the congressional maps. We don't talk as much about the legislative, at least at the national level. But the nation's focus has turned on North Carolina because of Moore versus Harper, which is, of course, at the Supreme Court. And some people believe that could give kind of a blank check to representatives in this state to do what they will, whether that be with legislation on map making or otherwise, that they can kind of override the courts and they can be on their own. as someone who is in one of these states across the country, because North Carolina is not the only one that has a problem with maps and with the vote sharing being very different to the representatives that are in the state capital, what is it like being on the forefront of that fight and knowing that so much of it comes down to the courts and areas that sometimes aren't as much in your control as legislation can be, and then how disturbing is it to see democracy really be put on the plate like it has been?
There's so many issues to unpack with that one question, right? So it's the making judicial races and our courts partisan, I think was a major mistake. After there was a bipartisan movement in North Carolina to take politics out of judicial races, where we had public funding for judicial races, where people had to make a decision on who they wanted for a judge based on their resume and their qualifications, not whether they had a D or an R beside their name. And I think when we made that decision to go backwards, it really undermined the people's confidence in our court system being fair and impartial. I think the case of the U.S. Supreme Court on the independent state legislature theory is, if it goes the way of the speaker, then democracy across the United States, in these states where you will no longer have a check on what a legislature can do, what kind of maps they can draw. You won't, for all intents and purposes, have democratic government in that state anymore. Democratic, little d.
Yeah.
And I'm very concerned about it. I still don't think the U.S. Supreme Court will go there. When you followed the oral arguments, it sounded like there were enough of the justices who had concerns with opening this Pandora's box, that I hope that they will side against the speaker, and that we'll see democracy and the guardrails that are our courts remain in check. I still think we have work to do on restoring people's confidence in courts. When you look at public opinion polling, people don't have confidence in the U.S. Supreme Court, that it's not a partisan body making political decisions, or at least that politics enter into their decisions that they're rendering. And we have the same issue here with our state Supreme Court. But it all goes back to this years ago, the legislature deciding that we're going to go backwards and start bringing partisanship back into judicial races, which has, since that decision has been made, and we've seen it play its way into these court races, the people's confidence in the justice system continues to go down. And that should be something that all members of the General Assembly, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, should be concerned about, because if you're a Republican right now, it might be in your favor, but down the road it will be.
Switching over to more state-based politics, Democrats in North Carolina are, through election cycles, fighting both in the House and the Senate, and the national level. Constantly, everyone is tooth and nail really for these battles. On the Republican side, there's more of a shift from the center further right. What is it like, the charged atmosphere that is arising because of this? What's it like interacting with that on a daily basis, trying to find that middle ground, trying to work with the majority, knowing that you still have to pass things? It doesn't mean you just get to give up because you're in the minority. What's it like trying to work with the people that you're having to run against, and then also trying to keep the party unity, which of course is a big topic right now?
Yeah. So I think, it changes after every election, because the body of the Senate changes and the members change. And so where you may have had existing relationships last session, those folks might be gone now. So there's a lot of that, building new relationships, because we've got a lot of new members in the Senate, getting to know folks. It's just kind of like dating, you occasionally go out and have dinner or drinks with folks just to get to know each other, and what your background is, what your life is like, what drives you, what motivates you. And it's like anything else in everyone's life. You got to find out, you got to learn people, you got to understand them, what motivates them, what drives them, and then where you have common interest. And when you identify that, and they might be Republicans, they might be Democrats, they could be independents, you work on those issues where you have either shared interest or common motivations. And so that's how I approach it in the Senate. I think, and I trust everyone, and think the best of everyone until they prove me wrong. That has worked well for me and able to get some things through the Senate and ultimately through the General Assembly. And that's how I intend to approach this session, even though we have a lot of new faces. It's about getting to know people, understanding them, and identifying places where we can get along and move things down the road for the people of the state.
People are not just dividing over the topics, but also the information that they bring. People nowadays are inhibiting different realities. We have different facts, different truths, where you believe this because you've read it and you've seen the numbers, and someone has read the exact opposite thing, and that has made it very difficult for people to co-inhibit. And that's around dinner tables that don't involve politicians. What's that like for you to have to go into different parts of your districts and then even amongst your own friends and family, I imagine, and have those conversations that sometimes can be fraught because people are coming at it from such varying different angles with such varying different information?
So for me, when I go into a situation where I know the majority opinion in that room, whether it is a dinner table or a town hall, I use two things. One, I listen, and then I ask questions. Because if you can guide someone to an answer just by asking them questions and getting them there, instead of just going in and telling them your opinion and what you think the answer is, it's much more effective, it's less in their face, and it's disarming. So a lot of how I approach people and it doesn't always work. I mean, if it works 50% of the time, that's a great success rate. But, when you're dealing with a scenario that you've outlined, which is our reality today, that people have different opinions, they have different facts, and they're getting their news from these fringe websites, which I encountered a lady the other day, and I won't go into that because that was a really eye-opening experience. When people disagree with you and they have different opinions, you need to listen to them because they often have different opinions because they have a different life experience. And that's part of what makes this country and this state great, that we have a diversity of viewpoints and a diversity of opinions, but that's driven and motivated by a diversity of life experiences. And I think, I view my side, the Democratic side, is very good at listening and understanding people and where they come from and their different life experiences. I think we would be better served if the Republican majority in the Senate did the same. And I'll raise as the latest example the Parent Bill of Rights that they ran through the General Assembly this week. We had two committee meetings, the Education Committee and the Health Committee. We had parents and teachers and students show up to speak out against it. Every parent, every teacher, every student that showed up and that spoke against it. The only speakers that were there to speak for this Parents' Bill of Rights were these right-wing think tank paid lobbyists, in other words. If Republican members of those committees would have actually listened to what the speaker said and maybe sat down with them outside of a committee hearing and listened to their life experience, I guarantee you they would have a different view on that bill. Unfortunately, I know this bill is all about politics and it's red meat for their base, chasing something that doesn't exist. And it's unfortunate because in the meantime, the only people that get harmed are children. So I think, going back to your original question, listening and asking questions is how you deal with a tough crowd. And I think it's always served me well, and I wish more of my Republican colleagues did the same.
We'll switch to something a little bit lighter and something that's been really positive in your district, both from President Biden's infrastructure plan bill and then the continued efforts of Governor Cooper and the Democratic members of the legislature that have been bringing jobs and that sort of thing in. The 5-year-old astronaut in me really wants to talk about this, and that's Boom Supersonic, amongst others that have moved to your district in North Carolina. As a whole, how exciting is it? And then also with this particular, company that is very unique, what is it like seeing manufacturing and jobs streaming back into the state, seeing the effects of national and state legislation coming into effect and in being kind of the arbiter between your community and business world in making those connections and seeing that growth happening?
It is very exciting, and it's exciting for a lot of different reasons. When you talk about Guilford County, which it makes part of the triad, um, since the late 90s, we've really struggled with economic development. You have NAFTA, which took Guilford County of the triad used to be historically tobacco, furniture, and textiles. NAFTA really destroyed a lot of those industries, and the jobs went overseas. The triad has had a lot of start-stops with economic development success. We, in the 2005 and 6, started getting a little traction with some downtown redevelopment and bringing companies in. Then we had the financial crisis, which basically put us back to square one. So what I'm seeing now is a coordinated success between federal, state, and local officials all working together. I think President Biden's plan of building a sustained economy that's from the middle out instead of trickle down from the top down is obviously having great success. I think if you look at the jobs numbers from today, 500,000 new jobs created, is showing that is working. I think Governor Cooper, when he got elected, that was one of his top priorities, was lean in economic development. But new economy jobs that won't be taken away by artificial intelligence and robotics or shipped overseas. If you look at what we're doing in Guilford County, we are basically rebuilding an economy that is the perfect economy. We have the Publix Distribution Center, which are great low entry level jobs that don't require significant education. You have Boom Supersonic, which is cutting edge technology, next generation technology. And then we have the Toyota battery plant, and we have other things in the works that we can't talk about right now. But it is incredible to see all of this momentum, and I don't see, even if we do have a slight or moderate recession, I don't see that stopping this momentum for the triad. And somebody who's grown up there and would love for my kids to go to college, but then come back and live near us and have a happy and prosperous life in Guilford County, it's creating and building that future to make it possible. So it is really incredible. And specifically on Boom Supersonic, it's a neat project to watch because it's at the airport, obviously, which is real near my office. So every day driving in, I get to see the progress. And they just last week announced the groundbreaking to actually start to build their super factory. So we're in talks for more jobs from some of their suppliers and industry partners to bring to Guilford County. And I think we have a lot of exciting announcements in 2023.
Is there anything that during, whether it's been your time so far in elected office or things that you're looking forward to in this or future sessions, we've talked a little bit about the industry side of the job side, which is something definitely to brag upon. Is there anything else with that or otherwise that you've done or are looking forward to doing that you would like to tell people about while you have this platform?
Yeah. So when I first got elected, my core focuses were healthcare, education, economic development, and climate. And one of the things we haven't talked about was the energy bill from last session. And wasn't perfect, right? But legislation rarely ever is. But a southern state with a Republican-controlled General Assembly and a Democratic governor, all sides were able to come together to pass an energy bill that puts our public utility industry in North Carolina on path of carbon neutrality by 2050. Everybody said it couldn't happen, it couldn't be done. I was one of the lead negotiators for the Democratic caucus in the Senate on that bill that ultimately the governor signed into law and now is law, and the Utilities Commission is dealing with how we actually implement that law and reach those state-mandated goals. That was a good example, to go back to one of your earlier points, of taking a little baby step of trusting the other side that you could actually get something done, because I wasn't going to put my name on a piece of legislation if I didn't think it was the right thing or the best thing to do. And so we understood what some of the Republican caucus goals were of what they wanted to see in the energy bill. We listened to what the advocates wanted. We listened to what the industry wanted and needed. And we were able to come up with some baseline consensus legislation that, again, wasn't perfect. And if we were in charge and writing the bill, it would have looked a lot different. But the reality is We had to get something through a Republican Senate and a Republican House. And I think that piece of legislation was a high water mark moment for this General Assembly and for North Carolina. It was something a lot of other states and even the White House called and said, how'd you get that done? What's your secret? And again, it goes back to personal relationships, because it's the same. Anybody's life is the same. Personal relationships are one of the bedrock components of being successful, and being able to trust and listen and ask questions and understand where people are coming from is how you get things moved down the road.
Senator Garrett, I want to thank you so much, first of all, for your time sitting down with us, for your advocacy, for your public service. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it.
Folks, if you want to see the previous interviews that we've done, you can go to all of our channels across social media to see as we continue this Carolina Forward interview series. Thank you so much for your time.